I want to talk about this story from CNN. D.C. grand jury that handed up 2020 election indictment against Trump meets again. Now, there's a lot of speculation that they're going to be meeting again because more indictments are going to be handed down against Donald Trump. But there's also speculation they're now going to go after Giuliani and what they refer to as unindicted co-conspirators in Donald Trump's, what do they call it? Criminal fraud against the United States. So it looks like there's a likelihood. I think it makes more sense they're going to go after those quote unquote co-conspirators. What they actually mean is Trump's lawyers. Mm-hmm. They're going to go after the people who gave Trump legal counsel. And this is indicative of the expansion of the weaponization of government. Despite the fact that the Republicans are supposedly probing the weaponization of the DOJ, they're just ramping all of this up. But Tom, I'm wondering what you think about this. What are they doing?
Well, they're escalating. There's been no check. There's been no consequence for this abuse for the Justice Department or the FBI or everyone else involved here. You have Democrats in Georgia about to indict Trump, it looks like. You have the Democrats in New York indict Trump. And what they're trying to do is freeze the Republican Party in the run-up to the election by saying not only is the candidate and the former president, but people around him, the consultant class, your campaign lawyers, activists involved in advising you as to how to handle election disputes, they're subject to being thrown in jail if this is the case, that they end up getting indicted. And I think that's probably going to be true. You know, I testified to the grand jury back in February. They sent the FBI knocking at our door, my home, in November. And, you know, what did Judicial Watch do? Well, we were out there publicly talking about how the Mar-a-Lago case was a sham since they changed their position on presidential records from the Clinton-Sockdorf case that we had been involved in and changed it completely to go after Trump. Came up with new rules. And so complete retaliation. And then they spent 3 hours questioning me about emails and such about presidential electors. And I told them, I said, well, I don't understand what's going on here. Democrats challenged and had alternative slates of electors in 1960. So I guess it's different for Republicans.
And Nixon chose to ignore the certified electors. Instead, he chose the Democrat alternate slate to be counted, and they were counted.
Yeah. So, and on top of that, I told the grand jury, and I had 3 prosecutors questioning me. So it was a triple team on me. And they were, I told them that I was concerned in the summer of 2020, because I read about it in the New York Times, that Democrats were planning threats of secession and civil war if the Electoral College went towards Trump. And I said, well, of course, obviously that isn't going to be investigated by this Justice Department. And what I saw from this grand jury experience that I had was I was in a political argument with these prosecutors about First Amendment protected activity. And I was just sitting there thinking, why am I being questioned about all this? Is a political debate.
Why did they question you? Why did they call you in?
I was harassment and retaliation. Judicial Watch is the number one litigator against the Justice Department. We criticized the Justice Department. We sued for records about their abuse of Trump. They know who we are. They know who I am. And we were the top voice in calling them out. And it drove them crazy. And of course, the big accusation was, well, Trump was listening to Tom Fitton. It's just all sorts of, imagine if the head of the ACLU was called in because of the work he was doing at the ACLU. That's what they did to Judicial Watch. And of course, we don't get the protection and media support that the ACLU gets. But frankly, our work is more consequential. That's why the Justice Department was harassing and abusing us. So what I saw happen at that grand jury was abuse. And I'll tell you one quick story. At one point, the prosecutor said to me, so are you going to talk about this to anyone, what happened here? I said, I don't know. I said, it's, I have to talk to our lawyers, but that's privilege. Are you going to talk about this to anyone? I said, I don't know. It's publicly out there. Are you going to talk about this to anyone? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, oh, by the way, I thought you're allowed to talk about it. And I said, frankly, given your questions, it was pretty intimidating and chilling. So this guy was trying to get me to swear under oath to something I didn't have to do, which was to keep quiet on this abuse of power that I was facing. So I saw this guy was trying to corner me into swearing under oath that I wasn't going to talk. So that was, in my view, outrageous prosecutorial abuse. I'm still ticked about it, and I hope the courts take care of it in the end. I have no surprise that Trump was indicted after what I saw there. And, the grand jury's sitting there. I don't know.
The cultural divide in this country is unsalvageable as far as I'm concerned. The judge in D.C., right now they're trying to stop Trump from being able to speak during a political campaign while they use the case against him to campaign.
The only way...
You look at this judge in Minnesota who's sentencing these cops to prison. These leftist judges don't care about what justice means. They don't care about fairness. They care about power. They're not judges. They're effectively occupying forces placed in these roles for the purpose of destroying anyone who opposes them.
I mean, if the judges were honest, I don't know if honest is the right word. If I were a judge, I'd say, you know what? I'm not playing your game. You're trying to make me interfere in elections. I'm not going to do it. Your case is paused. You come back to me in November or December or January of next year, then we'll talk about what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we're not going to use my courtroom to litigate the campaign. And I'm not going to start telling President Trump that he can't defend himself, as Jack Smith made a political statement last week talking about how Trump was responsible for the attempted overthrow of the government and all the violence on Capitol Hill for which he wasn't even charged. Jack Smith should be the one on the dock.
Bingo.
If the judges were acting appropriately.
Because he said it was true. He didn't say allegedly. He just said the crime. He did the crime without the prosecutorial due diligence.
Well, I mean, I think that's a charitable way of putting it. But he came out and suggested that Trump was behind violence and he was promoting the indictment. And, you know, as folks who are smarter about this have explained, you know, a prosecutor can't come out and say, you know, read the indictment. That's the truth. Well, that's not what a prosecutor does. A prosecutor is supposed to say, read the indictment and all the evidence behind it, both inculpatory, the stuff that makes the guy look bad, and exculpatory. And so to say anything else is infecting the jury pool. So there's one man who infected the jury pool, in my view, that hasn't been held accountable, and that's Jack Smith. And of course, don't even get started in all the leaks that have been, I think, fairly attributed to the Justice Department of grand jury material.
You know, the problem is for, I think, conservatives and even libertarians to a great degree, post-liberals, whatever this faction is, keep thinking we're playing a game of Monopoly and we got to roll the dice to see if we can get ahead. Meanwhile, they're just pulling bills out of the bank and doing whatever they want.
Yeah, it's like a game of Monopoly where the goal of the game is to be the most popular person in the room. Doesn't matter if you win the board game. Well, you can stand up and flip the table and sing a song, and if everyone looks at you and starts clapping, you win.
But I completely disagree. That's not even it.
That's what this culture. You said the culture bifurcation you were talking about earlier. I agree.
Yes.
There's no way to get one of those pieces to win. You need to create something new that is so dynamically different.
What I'm saying is, imagine playing a board game where you keep playing by the rules and your opponent is cheating right in front of you, telling you they're going to cheat. They keep doing it. And you just keep playing.
Yeah. Sounds like those aren't really the rules.
Well, and in the case of the Republicans on the Hill, they're funding it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a thing the Justice Department's doing that I'm complaining about that isn't getting funding plus by the Republican House leadership. And so they have a decision over the next few months whether they're going to defund Jack Smith.
They're not.
Defund the censorship.
They won't.
But don't let anyone tell you they can't do anything about what is going on with the attack on Trump. So Trump is going to get jailed, I think, potentially. There's a good chance that happens. Americans are being censored. All this other abuse is taking place with the full funding and by Republicans. And they are saying, well, maybe legislation next year. But right now we're being hurt, and they could shut it down tomorrow. But they're on vacation. They're in the middle of a 7-week vacation.
That is unconscionable for the American government to vacate for 7 weeks at a time when you have the internet. You guys get back to work. What in the hell? Clint, you're about to say something awesome.
No, I was just going to say, I don't actually get that upset with Jack Smith. Jack Smith is a hitman for the regime. That dude's doing his job. What I'm upset with are the conservatives that have had an entire session in which they could have defanged and defunded so much of this nonsense, and they opted not to. Where are they?
They don't even want to impeach Biden. There's not enough evidence.
Yep.
I mean, it's like MSNBC's running the Republican House caucus in terms of being their fearfulness and proceeding with the impeachment inquiry against Biden.
What would be the process if the Republicans were to defund this process? Like, what would that look like? Who would say what? How would it move forward?
You would say the Justice Department can't spend any money prosecuting any presidential candidate. You could name the person. Prior to whatever date. They're there are scribes on the Hill that write the language out to prevent the funding of Jack Smith. They can actually defund people by name. So anyone who's been listed in terms of censoring Americans, they can be defunded. And believe me, I've been raising this since Republicans came into power.
And Congress can do this.
Go ahead.
Congress can do this without the Senate, without the president. They can just
control the purse
on their own, correct?
The House has to be willing to go to the mat on this. And by going to the mat is the Republicans the Senate isn't going to want to buy into this.
Yeah.
But they need the support of the House in order to keep the government funded. And so there's going to be a fight and probably the fall over whether to continue funding of the government because they won't get all the appropriations bills out, and there'll be one gargantuan bill that has to be voted on in order to keep the government operating for either a month or whatever period they agree. And only with the acquiescence of the House would that happen. And so in order to get that acquiescence, they could say, this is what we want. And if they're not willing to say that, that just tells you where they stand on this crisis we're facing. This isn't a political debate. When you're trying to jail a former president and the current candidate, you're kind of, you're leaving the Constitution behind, practically speaking. And the test here is, it wasn't like Trump did something. It's like, well, he robbed a bank. We don't know what the law is there. Here, they have these novel applications of the law, not only in New York, but in both cases against him in the federal government, certainly down in Georgia. And that tells you that they had him, they targeted him, and they tried to figure out how to jail him, because they had picked him as a target.
The documents shit was the worst, dude, because Biden had documents too. Like, let it alone.
Yeah,
Hillary Clinton had documents.
What the fuck?
Well, and then
Bill
also
had him in his sock drawer.
Russian collusion,
Yeah.
and then I think it was actually today or yesterday that you have the FBI agent that's now getting prosecuted for Russian collusion, and he was the one that lied to get the investigation started on Trump in the first place. It's
Unreal.
like everything they do. James Lindsay, Iron Law vote projection. Man.
Yeah, did you
It's
see?
incredible.
There was a tweet from was it the Secretary of State? No, it was. I was just like, is this satire? They were like, we condemn the Russian behavior of silencing the opponent political candidate.
Right. Was that Blinken who
It was,
said
I think
that?
it was. And I was like, is this satire? Because this is what they're doing to Donald Trump right now. Is the exact same thing.
What an embarrassment. I mean,
gotta
because,
find that.
Putin and Xi look at us and they must say, who are they kidding? America's different. And they pretend they're different. Putin recognizes what's going on with Trump. Xi recognizes what's going on with Trump.
Yeah,
But the idiot class that runs D.C., they pretend there's a serious crime that's being charged here. Everyone else sees, well, the guy's he's arrested his political opponent. What else do you need?
Well, and this is what Russia gets, or Putin gets dragged through the mud for, is exactly what's transpiring in America right now, which is going after your political opponents and jailing people for speech and reporting and all these other things. It's like everything we blame Russia for, we're guilty of, if not worse. It's incredible.
And Biden can shut it down. He's the president of the United States. And if he was honest and ethical, he said, you know what, guys, I don't care what crimes you've come up with. I'm not arresting my opponent. We're not prosecuting him. No.
Yeah.
And he's constitutionally enabled to do that. But instead, we found out on the documents case, the Biden White House intervened at key times to keep the case going against Trump and harassing him. So, but when it comes to this arrest of Trump now twice by his administration, Biden is ultimately responsible.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.